good evening and welcome to UK Crime Book Club. This evening, I can't even get my words out. So this evening, I'm delighted to be joined by Hannah. And Hannah is going to be talking about her book, One Dark Night, which I'm afraid I crinkled the corner of today when I was at work. So thank you,
I've
Hannah.
got mine here.
You got yours there?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Karen. Yeah, thanks for having me tonight on this very hot, steamy night.
We were just talking about it being, and actually your book is set in Halloween. So actually it was really difficult reading it in this heat because
Yes.
I was like, it's Halloween, it's cold. I need to go back to the
I know. I'm hoping it might cool a few people down in this current heat wave. It comes out on Thursday, so if it's still really hot and you
Yeah,
need something to chill you a bit, then it might be a good one to pick up.
exactly. Would you like to introduce yourself and your latest book?
I'd love to. So I'm Hannah Richell. I am the author of 6 novels, the sixth being One Dark Night. I've written 4 commercial fiction books previously, and then my first crime thriller was The Search Party, which came out last year and is a sort of twisty, glamping destination thriller set in Cornwall. But One Dark Night is a slight departure from Cornwall. It comes slightly further east to an area that I know very well near Bath. And it's the story, well, it starts with a group of students from a boarding school going out illicitly on Halloween night and having a party in the woods. And come daybreak, a shocking discovery. A body is discovered up at the abandoned stone folly at the top of the woods. And this book is essentially the week that follows that discovery as the students from the school and the staff there and the local police force are trying to discover what happened on that one dark night and who was killed and why they were killed. And so that's really the premise of the book.
Yeah, it's really, as I said to you just before we came on, I really enjoyed it. It's a really gripping book. You get into it, and obviously I'm from Devon, so I know, and I love Bath, so I
Yeah.
love the story. So what was your sort of inspiration to write about this? Because obviously you did Cornwall last time. So what was your inspiration to write about? Was this an area that you know well?
It is. I mean, I live on the Wiltshire-Somerset border. And I'm always inspired by location in my writing. I tend to sort of fix on a location almost before anything else. And with this book, the inspiration came really from a drive I took down a road quite late on a November night, and it was dark. And it was a very winding, steep road with woods on both sides. And when I looked at the sat nav, I was kind of concentrating on where I was going.
Yeah.
And there was this sort of eerie mist just drifting on the road. You know how sometimes you get that
Yeah.
sort of almost like
Yeah, so it's
smoke?
just sort of like just hanging.
Yeah. And it was such an odd drive. It was a very strange atmosphere. And when I looked at the sat nav, I saw that the road was called Sally in the Wood. And I just thought, Sally in the Wood, that is such an odd name for a
Yeah.
stretch of road. So when I got home, I actually Googled it and kind of started to dig a little deeper into who Sally was. And discovered that there weren't really any answers. There's lots of stories and folklore about the area, lots of ghost stories, lots of creepy tales. There's stories of a girl in a white dress being seen by motorists rushing out and causing cars to have accidents. And apparently it's one of the most haunted spots in England. So
Oh wow.
knowing all of that and having had this slightly creepy experience, I then took my dog for a walk through the woods. And people have been saying online, you don't hear the birds singing in these woods, and there's a very strange atmosphere. And if you walk to the very top, there's this tall, abandoned stone folly that just stands there looking out across the valley towards Bath. And it's just one of those places as a writer when you get
Mm,
there and you step foot, and my dog wouldn't go inside the tower when I went in to have a look. He was
really?
hanging back. And I just thought, this is gold.
Yeah.
This has to be in a book. So I've fictionalized everything else around the woods and the road and the folly, but that sort of actual sort of those elements are real and
Yeah.
do exist. And so I've just kind of let my imagination take me into kind of a more of a modern twisty whodunit from there.
because I think I sort of because I'm from Devon, and obviously we have like Dartmoor, where we've got the stories of the hairy
Yeah,
hand, and it's
yeah,
similar. And although that is various locations, it's not sort of confined to one space, which I thought was really interesting for for that to have that sort of a name, because that's quite a sort of strange. I know there's sort of like places get named like, and then it sort of sticks, but you couldn't find out anything about sort of how it.
no.
No,
Well, there's lots of different stories about it. So
right,
some people say that, I mean, the boring explanation is that during the Civil War, there was a huge battle that took place at the top of the hill, and to sally is to rush forward. So it was a sally in the wood. So
right,
that's the kind of more boring explanation. But then there's also tales of a widow being kicked out of her huntsman's lodge when her husband was killed, and she refused to leave, and then she kind of roamed the woods, and everyone thought she was a witch. And there's another story about the girl in the white dress. So
yeah,
it's just, I think it's one of those places that just inspires conversation
yeah,
and tales of supernatural things. So, well, this book isn't supernatural. I had quite a lot of fun playing around with that sort of spooky vibe, and
yeah,
setting it at Halloween, was obviously a kind of no brainer because I wanted teenagers involved in everything.
yeah.
So, yeah, so it just kind of all grew from this one place in quite a magical way.
And is that sort of generally where you start with it? You said, you mentioned just now about the setting is quite important, and is that sort of generally where you start, or is it the idea that comes and then the sort of setting?
I think it has varied over the six books, but I don't think, I mean, I've always found I couldn't really start to write until I feel very anchored in a sense of place. Because for me and my writing, I like to kind of pull the landscape into the book, and I need
Yeah,
to kind of understand what the landscape is that my characters are moving through, because I like to use that to enhance the themes and the plot even. So um, it may not necessarily be the starting point. It was for this book, but
yeah.
certainly in other books I don't think it was. But I need to know where
You need
it's
to know
in.
where it's going to be. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So like the previous book was Cornwall, and I used the area of Zena as a bit of an inspiration, but then again created this fictional peninsula that I could
yeah.
throw my characters into.
Because Xena's quite out on a limb, and on its own, and sort of,
Yes,
yeah, sort of quite bleak, particularly when it's raining and misty and
yes,
you drive. I always think it's a bit like Postman Pat Land when you drive
yeah.
along. You've got all the low little walls.
Yes, it is. That's a very good description. Yeah, I mean, I just love playing around with, the atmosphere in a book, and
Yeah,
weather, obviously that whole pathetic fallacy thing where, the weather is mirroring what people are sort of feeling inside. As a
yeah.
writer, it's kind of gold dust, really. Just you get to kind of sprinkle it on top.
Because this book is it's really tense. Actually, really, like, I mean, basically the sort of the murder happens pretty much straight away. From the outset that there's a murder. I won't say who gets murdered, but so and it's with I don't know whether it's because of the teenagers or whether it's because of the. I was just interested how you sort of got that sort of tension to run through it, because there is a real, because
Yeah.
it's not just the people involved, it's the, so you've got Ellie, haven't you? So Ellie's
Yes.
the daughter of Rachel and of Ben, and Ben's a detective and
Yes.
Rachel's a counsellor in the school.
Yes.
And their daughter Ellie goes to the school where the incident happens around, I think we can say.
That's right. Yeah, so she's a scholarship student at this
Yeah,
very expensive boarding school. So she's a bit fish out of water there.
yeah,
She lives on the campus with her mum, Rachel, who is working at the school, and her dad. So her parents are estranged, and her dad is a local police detective. So they're all totally enmeshed in the
yeah,
community, both at the school and in the local town. And that was a really fun dynamic to play
mm,
around with. But for me, it was crucial that the three of them were involved in the workings of the whole week, and
yeah,
indeed, what had happened on that night. Um, and I think the tension, I mean, part of it is atmosphere that we've sort of talked about. So the
yeah.
area and the ghost stories and Halloween and all of that. But I think another great way to add tension to a story is for everyone to have their secrets and to not be telling the truth.
Yeah. So
Um,
yeah, so Ellie's got lots, hasn't she?
Yes, I mean
You
she's a
can say
typical
that. It's,
teenager.
yeah,
Yeah, like her mum wants to crack her head open and find out what's going on
yeah.
inside,
Well, because her
and
mum's a
she,
counsellor, isn't she? So that she wants to get inside, and but she's also got her own things that she's dealing with, hasn't she? Because she's yeah, it's sort of the sort of dynamic between her and Ben as well is a bit unfinished, isn't it? Because of other
it
things that
is.
happened.
That's right. And the fracture between them means that those secrets can fester and the
Yeah,
communication isn't quite flowing between them. So when their daughter's in trouble, um, they're not quite on the ball in a way that you would imagine perhaps a student counsellor and a police detective
yeah,
might be under normal circumstances. But yeah, and Ellie's got her walls up and she's very resistant. She's angry with her parents for
yeah,
separating. And she can't bear the fact that she's at the same school where her mum works, and she feels like her mum's constantly trying to therapy her.
yeah.
So there's a
Which I
lot
think
of
she is,
resistance.
isn't she?
She is, yeah, she is. And Ben's the completely opposite parent, where he comes down really hard and is very strict. So
Yeah,
she's sort of resisting all of that. And I just thought it'd be really interesting for her to be in this school where she's sort of told that she's very lucky to be there,
yeah.
but she isn't particularly comfortable. It's not really her world.
No, and she likes art, isn't she? That's how she sort of gets in. She's
Yes,
talented at art,
that's
and
right.
that's how her mum sort of
Yes,
sells her to the headmistress. Really, isn't it? Is that she's very
that's right.
talented at art, and I imagine as probably some sort of sort of exclusive schools, they do like to have scholarship students. They like to be able to give children who don't have the same
Yeah,
access to sort of to that sort of education a chance. Um,
absolutely.
but also she gets quite a lot of grief about that, doesn't she, from the people who
Yeah,
do who pay, which I think is probably similar in state schools as well. I remember when I was at school, there was the whole free school meals thing, which
yeah,
was it's children are cruel.
yeah. They are, and there's hierarchies. It's like society is boiled down to this sort of really horrific microcosm that the kids are kind of wading through at school,
Yeah,
and I think it's torture for a lot of kids. So yeah, I kind of wanted to have those tensions at play as well within the story. So the idea in every chapter is, as a thriller writer, which is as I say, it's only my second crime thriller, but my sixth novel. It's
yeah,
not really that different to writing any kind of novel, in that you want to give your reader a reason to turn the page. So at the end of each chapter, you kind of need to make sure there's a reason for why you want to keep reading. So that was sort of my
yeah.
mission writing this book, to keep the stakes high and keep the tension flowing, so that hopefully when you're there at night and you don't want to turn the light off and you don't want to stop reading.
No, because it's really difficult. I mean, we always have this conversation when we're reviewing because we're talking about the book, but we don't want to talk about the book because not everybody will have read it, and we want people to read it if they haven't read it already. So, but there's a real sort of sort of twist in the story. Where, well, there's quite a lot of twists actually. um, but yeah, it didn't really go in the direction I thought it was going to go in, which was that your sort of sleight of hand.
I love it when people say that, because obviously you want people to be surprised. You don't want them to be so surprised that it doesn't make sense at the end,
No,
but you want to have that kind of moment where it just feels like there's this kind of reveal and you just
yeah,
think, I thought I had it nailed, but I didn't. And I love books like that. I
yeah,
mean,
me
I love
too.
reading crime thrillers, and
Yeah,
if I guess it too early, I'm always disappointed.
same. I am too,
Yeah.
and I didn't guess it at all. And I really like that in a book because I don't. And I thought when so actually I think, can we say that Ellie gets pulled into it? I think that's
Oh,
okay to
yes.
say, isn't
Yeah.
it? So
100%.
Ellie
Yeah.
gets pulled into it, and I was like, no, she, no, it can't. That's just too obvious. But then there's so many other sort of strands that that's going on with her. You just don't know. She's involved with something. She's been involved right
Yeah.
from the outset, but that would have been just like, no, that can't be it can't be her. And
Yeah.
then her parents get sort of, and I think that whole thing that she's sort of played them off against each other, hasn't she, to go to the party, whereas she think one thinks they're with him and the other one thinks they're with, and she almost caused a rift between them as well because of that.
Yes. Yes.
So she's, when I was reading that bit about her being, found out, it takes you back to like being found out, because I think we've all done that, haven't we? We've all said
Oh,
we're in
yes.
places that
Yes. No, I mean, I've got two teenagers of my own and three step teenage kids. So I'm surrounded by teenagers at the moment. And so it was kind of fun to sort of play in their world a bit.
yeah.
And fortunately, we haven't gone through anything quite like this poor family does. But
Oh God, no, I know.
they were great to kind of bounce ideas off, and even just to kind of talk to about, the language they use at the moment and the sort of dating landscape, what that looks like for them, and the things that they're facing in terms of the challenges and the school issues that we've talked about. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was helpful to have some real life teenagers in the background who could kind of correct me when I was steering in slightly the wrong direction.
And did that sort of, being a parent yourself, did that sort of help you? Was it difficult to write as a parent, or did that help you sort of to
I
write it?
I think it probably helps. I mean, I think as a writer, you should be able to hopefully put yourself in lots of different people's shoes.
Yeah.
But obviously, those experiences that you have as a human being that, change you and change your heart. And, when you can actually put that on the page in some way, I think it hopefully comes across as a more authentic reading experience. So,
Yeah.
yeah, anything which I think, I'm drawing from my own life, even if it's in a fictional way, it's always helpful because you feel like you're writing from a more authentic place, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was because when that bit of when she's in the room with her mum and her dad, and they're sort of asking quite sort of intense questions to her, it was just like, you could, as a parent, I was like, oh God, can you imagine? This must be
yeah,
like this. And the fact that her mum works at the school, her dad's a police officer, I
yeah.
mean, but her dad isn't there at that point. The
And of
mum,
course, that's right. And they're biased. They want
yeah,
to believe her, they love her, they want to support her. But deep down, there's this terrible fear that, she might have done something really terrible.
yeah.
And they're not quite ready to face that.
And then because of that, obviously Ben gets taken off the case, which sort of adds another sort of layer, because he's got his own demons, hasn't he? He's
He
got stuff.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So everyone's in the book, the key characters, they've all got their sort of issues that they're struggling with.
Yeah.
And I think that's what creates this sort of messy soup that
Yeah.
they all kind of get stuck in. And of course, you've got the overarching fear that there's probably a real life killer out there, a serial killer who could strike again. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of quite vulnerable students who want to go and hang out in the woods, and they've got a job to do, and the clock's ticking if they're going to catch the person that's
Yeah.
done this terrible crime. So that's also adds to the tension.
So you said this was your second thriller that you'd written. How did you sort of manage with the sort of police procedural material? How do you sort of do your research for that? Do you have anybody you consult on that, or do you fictionalize it on research that you can do yourself?
Yeah, so there's a lot of internet searching.
Yeah.
Then there's a lot of watching crime drama and reading crime, which sort of hopefully sort of start to absorb some of the
Yeah.
language and the technicalities. But then there were some key questions I wasn't particularly sure about. So fortunately, one of my ex-neighbours used to work in the police force. So I did email him a few questions and get him to sort of give me his thoughts on a
Yeah.
few key points. But I have put at the very end of the book, any mistakes are completely my own, because the truth is that as a writer, you hope that everything is accurate and realistic. And, if a police officer was to read the book, I'm sure
Yeah.
they would find things that aren't
Oh,
quite right.
yeah.
But it requires a little bit of artistic license as well. And so, yeah, you try and keep it as accurate as possible. But yeah, don't come at me if I've got things horribly wrong.
Sort of did you, when you sort of wrote the story, you obviously wanted to give the reader a chance to sort of guess who it was, although I didn't, I failed miserably. But is that, you sort of said you want it to be, you want them to be able to, but then also you don't want them to be able to. So
Yeah.
I guess that's the sort of tricky balance of giving enough away if they're really really on it they could get it.
Yes. I don't think it should be a cheat. Like, you
No.
can't pull the rabbit out of the hat at the end and go, ta-da, and
Yeah.
have everyone sort of scratching their heads and saying, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But that's not fair. We couldn't have worked it out even. So
No.
you have to lay the breadcrumb trail. And I think for me, what worked with this book, and perhaps why the twist, I hope, is convincing and surprising, but makes sense as well. I think maybe it works that way because as I was writing it for a good chunk of the book, I knew who had done it, but I
Yeah.
didn't know why they'd done it. So I had a lot of head scratching moments where I was
Interesting. Yeah.
sort of sitting there at my desk thinking, I've really got to figure this out because otherwise this book's dead in the water.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of learning my process might be to not know everything up front and to let the story almost reveal itself to me as I go.
Yeah, because that's quite interesting because obviously I know who did it, so
Yeah.
um, and I can't ask too many questions about it. But actually, the fact that you knew that it was them, but you didn't know why, sort of makes me think, oh yeah, that's really interesting. So actually, I can imagine that was quite a
Yeah.
challenge, really.
It was, but it's such a lovely moment when it's like
Yeah,
putting that last piece of the jigsaw in place. You've been searching for it and searching for it. It's probably on the floor somewhere,
yeah,
but you've got no idea how to solve it. And then suddenly it's like, yeah, you just slot it into place and it feels like everything's sort of become this wonderful whole. So, yeah, it's a good feeling as a writer when you actually
yeah.
finally get there.
So did you sort of so I was trying to go back to my questions because so basically the sort of story, sort of, it's really so difficult to talk about. So what can I say, sort of, there's a lot of things hidden, isn't there, that get uncovered as you go through. Did you sort of, were they sort of in it as, do you write sort of linear, do you know, do you, or do you sort of, is there part of the editing process that you go back in and go, actually that needs to go in there, or I need to move
Yeah,
that, or,
that's a good question. So, my previous book had a sort of back and forth narrative where it was sort of spinning between different characters' points of view and different timelines, and it was
yeah,
actually a real headache to write. Whereas One Dark Night is more, 1 week unfolding, and
yeah,
you still get the different character point of views, but the timeline is very, in a straight line.
yeah,
You're just moving forwards through this week. So I started writing it very much as like, how do I tell the story of this week and jumping between the characters? But I sometimes find that there's a scene or an idea in my head that's just sort of itching to be written. And so occasionally I'll sort of jump ahead
yeah,
or dart back and kind of move around the manuscript in that way so that I can make sure I'm writing the bits that I'm most excited about,
yeah.
and then it sort of helps to keep momentum going as well, I think. And sometimes when I get really stuck, I try and write the end so that it's almost like having a map where you can kind of work from A to B, and
Yeah.
even if the middle's really messy, as long as you've got the end point, you're going to get there.
So are you a, you don't sound like you're a strict plotter. You don't.
No, not a strict plotter. Like, I like to know my characters, I like to know
Yeah.
the landscape, and I like to know where I'm heading, and then I sort of jump in and just see what happens. But I don't think it's the easiest way to write a book. And I certainly have spoken to quite a few writers who do the opposite to me, and they map everything out, to the
Yeah.
letter, really. They have these chapter breakdowns and then they sit down and they write it in 3 months and it's done. And
Yeah.
I wonder if that, would be a slightly kinder way on myself to write a book. But I love to be in it and just letting it flow.
It's
And
sort of more creative, isn't it, the way that you do it? And I think it probably depends on who you are, because I think some people are real pantsers and they've got absolutely no idea when they sit down and absolutely know nothing, which would terrify me.
Yeah, that
Um,
frightens me too.
but then again, that's like the sorry, this tractor just gone down past. I'm in really in Devon.
Devon,
Um,
yeah.
that it's yeah, it's sort of that very creative to be able to just do that, to be able to sort of chuck yourself in and go.
Yeah,
Whereas some people are much more, and I imagine it's the same with any sort of writing. It's not even just books, is it? It's like essays or anything like that. Some people have the ability to go by
true.
the seat of their pants and go for it, whereas other
That's
people just
true.
need to be really
Yeah.
regimented and have that routine.
I think for my mind, the thought of having everything mapped out, clear, you know, very like prescriptive,
Yeah,
I think I'd be bored. I think I'd probably, it would feel like I was doing my homework. And
yeah,
actually, for me, the joy is to kind of just discover it as I go, but with a framework.
yeah. So what? So you said you've written 6 books. So the
Yes.
other 4, are they fiction?
They are fiction. My debut, which came out a long time ago now in 2012, was called Secrets of the Tides, and it was a Richard and Judy book club book way back when. And then the next book was The Shadow Year, and then I wrote a book called The Peacock Summer, and then the follow-up to that was The River Home. And they were all sort of family mysteries with suspense running through them,
Right.
but not, there was no police procedural in them.
No.
The first book, for example, was about the disappearance of a little boy and the impact that has on a family. And the second book was about a group of university students who decide to drop out in the middle of the Peak District for a year and see what happens, and it all goes horrendously wrong.
So there
So
is
I've,
definitely an element of suspense in there,
oh
even if they're
yes,
not crime per se, sort of, but they're
yes,
definitely suspenseful.
yeah, I've always loved reading psychological thrillers. I started in my teens just lapping up Nikki French,
Yeah,
and so I think I've always had a sort of desire to put the suspense into my stories,
yeah.
because I think that's why, particularly in the world of commercial fiction, people want to be entertained, but they want to keep turning the pages. And
Yeah.
I love those sort of, they get a bad rap, beach reads, but I love a beach read
Oh,
because
yeah,
it's
me too.
that book that you just want to just sit on the
Keep
sun
going.
lounger and not put down.
Yeah,
And so for me, that's always what I'm trying to do with my writing, is to create a reading experience for somebody where they just don't want to put the book down.
yeah. No, that's, I mean, it's, yeah, you can definitely, so that I think the suspense, it was once something that I really picked up on in,
Mm,
because I read a lot of crime and I like to be surprised. I like to have that sort of, I like the sort of the spooky, although it's not supernatural, there's definitely spooky. You've got the caves and you've got the folly and you've got
yes.
things that go bump in the night sort of
And
thing.
pumpkins.
Yeah. And also not everything's as it seems to be, is it, as well? I think
That's
that's
right.
always a really sort of interesting sort of thing to put in the. So did you always want to be a writer? Have you always written?
I have always written in a form of some kind or another. And it started off just privately with diaries. And I was a big reader as a kid. Writers to me always seem like these magical unicorns that just existed, and books existed, but I never really considered that it was a real job that you could do until I was thinking about what I would do after university. And I decided to go into publishing, which was as close as I felt I could ever get to being in that world.
Yeah,
And so I had a really fun career working for some of the big publishing companies in London and then in Sydney, because I immigrated to Australia for a while. And then I worked for a bit in the film industry. And it was only when I got pregnant in my early 30s with my first child that I just suddenly thought, I want to do something creative. It was
yeah,
just something bubbling up in me. And so I just started writing kind of long form just to see what would happen, fiction.
yeah,
And that piece of writing actually eventually became Secrets of the Tides, which was my debut book, which got picked up. So that's how it all kind of came about. But yeah, it was always something that if I'd been truly honest with myself, I would have said as a little kid, yeah, I'd love to be a writer,
Yeah.
but it just didn't seem like a
No.
job. So I'm kind of amazed still now that I get to do it as my job.
Well, I was going to say, working in publishing as well and knowing how hard it is to get published, did
Yes.
that sort of put you off in any way? Because you saw so, I guess you saw so many
Yeah, I think
people
it
who got
gave me,
rejected.
yeah, it gave me a very realistic approach to it
Yeah.
in terms of, the number of editorial meetings I had sat in
Yeah.
and seen, you know, brilliant books brought to the table, spoken about incredibly passionately by editors. And then they didn't get picked up for whatever reason. It could be that the market wasn't quite right, or
Yeah.
something very similar had just been published or was about to be published. And it can be the smallest thing that means a book
Yeah.
is or isn't picked up. And so I went into it feeling quite realistic and with very low expectations.
Yeah.
So to sort of find a publisher, to find an agent to start off with is quite hard, then a publisher, and then, to start having things going well, like, getting a Richard and Judy
Well, I
book.
mean, that's amazing for a debut, isn't it? To get a Richard and
Yeah, it
Judy.
was it was kind of mind blowing, to be honest. It was one of
Yeah.
those moments where your editor phones you up and tells you, and you're sort of screaming down the phone, thinking, "This is not real." Um, so yeah, that was a pretty special moment. But in a long career of writing, it's very much a long game. There's peaks and troughs, and there's really hard
Yeah.
times, and then there's wonderful moments too. So I'm kind of learning just to. The only thing I can control is writing the books, and then everything else that happens is sort of almost not my business.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds weird, but
You just do the creative bit, and then somebody else can worry about the rest of it.
yeah. And then you have to hope that it finds the right home.
Because I think as well, like the sort of do you think the pressure? Did you feel more pressure by having that sort of first successful debut with the second one? Did you sort of feel
Yeah,
like almost like the second one had to be as good as the first one because the first one was so successful?
I think the second book is notoriously hard because
Yeah.
unless you've written lots and lots of books and not been published, I didn't know if I could do it again. It almost felt like some
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't
wonderful
it? Yeah.
fluke. Yeah. So then there's this pressure, right? Okay, now you do it again, and you've got to
Yeah.
do it in a year.
And again and again.
Yeah, exactly. And so there was pressure, and I did crumble a bit. I started writing a book, that the second book, and then got about 6 months in and realized I hated it, and had quite a long soul searching conversation with my agent and said, look, I've got this other idea, but and she said, oh, for goodness sake, just write what you want to write.
Yeah.
So I ditched and then wrote Hell for Leather on the new idea, and luckily hit the deadline. And actually it was one of those books that just kind of flew out. So I was very lucky. I've not experienced that since, funnily enough. Not had a book fly
Did you
out.
go back to it, or is it gone like that
It's
one?
gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I just knew I was sort of forcing myself to write something that my heart wasn't truly in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think when
Yeah.
it's not quite right.
That's really interesting. I like that. So, what sort of who inspires you? Who's inspired your writing over the years?
Oh gosh, I mean, it would be everything from right back in my early years as a child reading, right through to sort of present day, where any book I pick up these days is I feel like it's teaching me something, even if I don't enjoy the book, I'm always kind
Yeah.
of questioning now, why didn't I enjoy that, or why do I want to put it down? So there's always something to learn from books. But I think my favorite writers, before I started writing myself, were people like Maggie O'Farrell, Nikki French, who I've already
Yeah.
mentioned, Jojo Moyes, David Nichols. I'm trying to think. Lisa Jewell. I've always loved
Yeah.
reading Lisa Jewell, and in fact, I've just read her new one, which comes out maybe this week too, and it's sensational as always.
Yeah. I mean, they're amazing. She's amazing, isn't she? She's
Oh
just so many that she. I mean, I've been reading them for years. Like,
yes, yeah, I know. She's just a powerhouse, I think, and every book she delivers is wonderful in
yeah.
its own way. So yeah, she's very clever. There's a crime series I'm really loving at the moment by a writer called Amelia Hall, which is set in Cornwall, funnily enough, and it's called The Shell House Detectives. And those books, if you love a crime series,
Oh, I've seen those. Yes. Yes.
they're so good. And she's got these wonderful characters that I think she's publishing the sixth book in the series now.
Yeah, yeah,
But
she's quite prolific, isn't she?
she
She's written
is,
quite a lot in a short time.
yeah, but she's a beautiful writer. So the writing quality is stunning, but also the plots are there. There's always this great kind of murder mystery at the heart of them.
Yeah,
But then you've got these characters that you've fallen in love with that you're following the whole way through. So
yeah.
I love those books.
Oh, I do love a
Gosh,
book set in Cornwall as well. I'm going to check your last one out because I do love
oh,
a book set
Search
in Cornwall.
Party.
Yeah,
Yes.
I do love a
Um,
book set in Cornwall.
so there's also The Sunshine Man by Emma Stonex, which came out recently. That's
I've got that on
really
my Kindle to read.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's I really enjoyed that. That's come out very recently. And I think the book that really blew me away last year was by an American writer called Tracy Sierra called Night Watching, which people may have read because I think it came out.
yeah, I've seen that around on social media a lot.
It's very frightening. So if
Is
you
it?
don't like scary books, it's probably not one to pick up. But it starts with a mum who's home alone in her house. She's got two kids in bed, and she's just been in to check on her young son, and she's walking back to her bedroom, and she stops and she realizes there's an intruder coming up the stairs. And that's the start of the book. And
Oh
it's
God.
just, it plays on all those fears that, as a woman, at night in a
Yeah,
house,
on your own.
on your own. Yeah, you just like the whole
Yeah.
way through. But it's brilliant, and she's a really fantastic writer. So I thought that was a terrific book.
Oh, I'll have to write that one on my list. I mean, I've got quite a few behind me. Well, I can see yours. You've
Yes,
got quite a lot as well. So
I think you're beating me there actually.
yeah, don't tell my husband will probably agree with you there. I'm on a bit of a self-imposed book buying embargo at the moment, but it doesn't seem to be very
Oh,
strict.
I find that very hard, and then I just go to the library and start
Well,
borrowing and
that's
stuff.
exactly what I do.
Yeah,
um, what's sort of your? Do you write full time? Do you have sort of? Because I know obviously it's it's quite a full time job, but not often everybody has that sort
yeah,
of ability to be able to write full time. Do you write full time, or you sort of do other
yeah.
things?
I'm very lucky. I do write full time now. So when I first started out, the first couple of books, I was working sort of part time on the side.
Yeah,
And then things just sort of started taking off to a degree where I could actually devote my time to it, which was really fantastic, actually, because my life changed really dramatically about 10 years ago. My husband died very suddenly.
oh,
And
no, sorry.
so I was raising two kids on my own and
Yeah,
sort of needed to be with them. And had this great job that I could just, when they were out of the house
yeah,
at daycare or at school or wherever they were,
you
I
could
could
sort of
just
do that. Yeah.
lose myself in these fictional worlds, and then sort of they'd come home and we could be a family again. So actually it's been such a blessing to have
God,
this
that's
job.
really, yeah, that's really, that's really sort of amazing that you've sort of been able to sort of pick up and carry
Yeah.
on doing that with with a young family and being that sort of breadwinner sort of thing.
Oh, thank you. I mean, yeah, I think it was hard at first to go back to the writing, and you sort of have to have that space
I was
mentally
going
in
to
your
say, yeah, I
head.
was going to say that must, yeah, because
Yeah.
quite
So
often reading and writing is the first thing to go, isn't it? If you're going for any sort of crisis.
that's right. And I think I put a lot of pressure on myself. There's that sort of panic that sets in, that you think, oh my goodness, this is all of me now, and
Yeah,
I have to make this work. But longer term, it was probably something that really saved me in a way that it gave me grace to kind of just escape the daily life
yeah.
and disappear into a life that wasn't my own. So actually, I think, yeah, writing as a sort of it has so many wonderful sort of
Mm.
benefits. I think if you write creatively for yourself, not necessarily to be published, but just as a release, it's always been a release for me, and so I'm so
Yeah.
glad I still have that.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is that quite often people think about writing. I write, but I don't have anything published. But I write for myself because I
Yeah,
don't at this time. I don't have anything ready to publish. But I think, as you said, it's definitely like that sort of release, isn't it? Of being able just to put some words down and maybe
totally.
one day it will come into something. And if it doesn't, you've written it anyway. So
Absolutely. And I think even those sort of, I know some people do morning pages where they just kind of
yeah,
journal. It's the first thing they do in the morning. Apparently, that's incredibly helpful for our brains.
yeah,
And I mean, it's kind of amazing. And I think in this world that we currently live in, which is so busy
Yeah.
and full of technology, and the arrival of AI is quite frightening, I think, when you look at our kids and how they're using it
Yeah.
and what that's going to do to their brains and their skills, and I mean all of that. I just think putting pen to paper
It's just
or
going back to really sort of that sort of very, very almost primal thing, isn't it? Of like even going back to like caves where, drawing on the cave wall with a stick.
yeah,
It's
I
that sort of,
agree.
yeah.
Because it's not necessarily, I mean, a book is connecting outwardly with people, hopefully, if you're
Yeah.
lucky enough to find readers. But I think just the writing process itself is a way of connecting with yourself. And so
Yeah.
for me, it's an incredibly helpful process.
Yeah. So anybody who's watching tonight who's sort of thinking about being a writer, you don't necessarily have to be a published author to be a writer, do you? You can just
No.
write.
And also, if you just write, you never know where that's going to lead. Because
No.
that's how I started. I just wrote,
Yeah.
and just sort of thought, oh, let's think about a family sitting in Dorset, in a beautiful clifftop house. And that's how it started. So, it doesn't have to be any bigger than that, really.
No. You just need that sort of idea. And how do those sort of ideas, because obviously I guess probably 7 books in now. I imagine we'll come on to that in a minute, but I imagine you're on. How do you sort of, is that something? Is your brain very much like when I'm writing this book, I'm writing this book and nothing else is, or do you get like little things coming in when you're writing?
I wish it was as sort of focused as, I'm writing this book and there's nothing else
Nothing else
happening.
coming in yet.
Yeah, no, it's always, I think I get about 30,000 words into any book, and then the new idea comes, and it feels like this amazing, shiny thing that I'm just sort of like, oh, what's that?
Yeah,
And I'm kind of learning that you have to just focus on the first shiny idea that you had. And even though it's not feeling shiny anymore because you're kind of in the mud with it,
yeah,
you have to just keep going because that is the process.
yeah,
But obviously, write down the notes for the shiny idea and keep them parked somewhere.
yeah. For when you've got that, when the other
Yeah.
one's gone in.
But that is the nature of writing, I think, is that you have to kind of wrestle a bit with it. It's you're probably not doing it quite right if it feels super
It's that
easy.
easy. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean and there's always distractions. I mean, that's just life, right?
yeah,
So a lot of it is filtering things out. But one of my techniques when I get really stuck is to think about the characters in greater detail. Often if I find that my plot's getting stuck, it's because I've not understood my characters properly. And as
yeah,
soon as I go back and really think about my characters and who they are and what their motivations are, that often unsticks something within the story.
yeah,
And the other thing I do, if anyone's writing at the moment getting stuck, is I stand in the shower. And it's not great for water conservation, but I find that standing in a sort of cubicle with the water running where nobody can come and distract me and there's no phone beeping and you're literally kind of locked in this bubble.
yeah.
For me, that's where a lot of my best ideas come from. And I get out the shower and I'm literally running for a
I was
pen.
going to say, do you have to
Yeah,
like get right out and,
yeah.
because quite often I'll find things come to me like I'll wake up in the morning and I have like, this really great idea and then I'll go back to sleep. And then when I wake up, I'm like, I can't
It's
remember that.
gone. I
Yeah.
know. Yeah, what's that about? It's always it feels like at the time it is the best
The
idea,
best
right?
idea you've ever had. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, whether in reality it's just that it's 4 in the morning and your brain is sort of just quiet and whether you actually write it down and you go, oh, actually, that's okay.
I did see a very funny thing online the other day, which was writers sharing the middle of the night notes they'd written on their phones when they'd woken up and had a
Yeah.
brilliant idea, typed into their phone and then gone back to sleep. And then when they look at them later and they open up, they were kind of showing people what
Oh,
their notes
really?
were. And it
Yeah.
was just total nonsense. Like didn't make any sense whatsoever. So I think we all have those moments in the middle
Yeah.
of the night. Yeah.
Well, I think I've said on here before that Agatha Christie always used to go and do the dishes because she used to say that that was sort of like her shower moment of just
Right.
hands in the sink,
Yes.
just sort of like just you're not really thinking about anything apart from doing the dishes. I
I
guess it's
hadn't,
just having that clear head, isn't it?
yeah, I hadn't heard that about her, but that's
Yeah,
fantastic. Yeah, what a great detail.
yeah, yeah. I think it just sort of shows that sort of you need that sort of It's almost a bit like meditation, isn't it? In a way that
Mm,
you're just in that space of just doing, like you said, having a shower, washing the dishes,
yeah,
mundane sort of stuff that you're not having to think about. Whether you're going to have to
yes,
pay the milk or take
that's
the
right.
dog to the vet or whatever.
Yeah, just like getting out of yourself. Weirdly, getting out of your own head sometimes helps you solve problems,
Yeah,
or yeah, drift back into something in a in a new angle, which I think is helpful. So yeah, the brain is a very strange and wonderful thing.
definitely. So, what's next for you?
Well, I'm writing my, let me think, eighth thriller at the moment. Is it? No, not eighth thriller, my eighth book. Is that right? I've got a book coming out next year, which is a bit of a different genre. It's non-fiction.
Oh, right.
And then I'm writing the thriller that will come after One Dark Night. So that's
Oh,
where
so
my
you're like a book ahead already. You've got like next year off, sort of thing.
sort of, although I've got a September deadline at the moment. So
Uh,
it's a summer of pain. I'm going to just sort of keep my head at my desk. And
yeah.
unfortunately, the kids are going to have to fend for themselves because the deadline is looming. But yeah, so I'm writing the new book, which will probably come out. I don't know if it'll come out next year or the year after. But it's fun to be doing fiction after having sort of been thinking in a sort of non-fiction way for a little bit.
And can you
So,
say anything about that one, or is it top secret at the moment?
well, it hasn't actually been announced, but it's yeah, it's more of a sort of personal story. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, I think there's going to be an announcement in the next few weeks about it.
Oh,
So yeah, it's
exciting.
something very different.
Yeah. Oh, that is exciting. And have you got any sort of events sort of lined up for One Dark Night? Are you going to be doing any of the festivals, or
Not at the moment, no. So I am, as I say, kind of on
because
deadline.
you're on deadline? Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm hoping sort of later in the year or certainly early next year when the paperback comes out, I will be out and about a lot more. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm yeah definitely sort of doing online things at the moment because it's much easier to do
Yeah.
those sorts of things from home without having to travel too far.
Yeah.
So
Because I guess a book tour is very involved, and
it is.
because you're going to be doing several shops
Yes,
or locations in a short period of time, aren't you? So even if you do a week, it's just a week of complete intense
it
just
is. Yeah,
travel and
it is. And I was, One Dark Night came out in Australia and New Zealand at the beginning of the year. So I was actually over there
oh wow,
promoting the book around
yeah,
that time. So it's strange actually the way the publishing cycle works and in different
mm,
territories. So it sort of feels like, I've left this book. I've finished writing it quite a long time ago now.
yeah.
But yeah, so I'm having to sort of pull my head back into it to
So is
talk
that
about
quite
it.
unusual to have it? Because I know I have seen it where you have writers that it comes out in Australia and
Yeah.
or America before here, or quite often it will have a different name altogether, isn't it? For America, the American audience, sometimes it will have completely a different
Yes.
name.
It is unusual, I think, because I have quite a sort of good profile in Australia, having lived over there for quite a
Yeah,
few years. I think the publisher there felt that they would maximize the book if they published it in summer, which of course is January. Um,
yeah,
so they wanted to sort of flip it, whereas the UK publisher wanted to stick with this timeline. So I don't know what will happen with the next one. I have a feeling they might all tie up together again, but
yeah,
we'll see. It's tricky when you have a book that's so autumnal. Different hemispheres obviously have different weather things
yeah.
going on.
Because I think the thing is also publishing is always that little bit ahead, isn't it? So like, although it's come out and we're like, it's going to be what's it going to be, the 2nd, 3rd of July that it will come out.
Yeah, Thursday. Yeah,
But actually, it's not that far to October.
I know. I know. And then, of
um,
course, the ebook, they want the ebook available, and then the paperback gets another bite of the cherry. So,
yeah.
yeah, so it's all a very careful science that they plot out, and yeah, you just sort of nod and go, "Great, thank you very much."
So going back to the book just before we finish the hour, sort of, what was the what was the sort of biggest challenge of writing this story?
Definitely working out the motivation for the murderer.
Yeah,
And then I think just wrangling with the characters, making sure that key people on the page felt three-dimensional, and that the world that they were existing in felt real.
Yeah.
So it's about the kind of layers that you add in. So, it's not just about the plot and how you get from A to B, but then hopefully creating a world that a reader can kind of lose himself in, and just sort of, yeah, disappear into for a few hours. So
I think that was, yeah, I think that's when I was saying earlier about that sort of there are lots of layers in this book. It's you've got, it's not just there's a murder and then there's so many different strands of things going on, that's where I think the sleight of hand is even more sort of, because you become focused on, well, I became focused on who I thought it was, and then like
yes.
there was all this other stuff going on which I wasn't taking any notice of.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a lot of sort of tensions within the community
Yeah,
that create a sort of, first of all, tension, but also the red herrings that you need within
yeah.
a murder mystery, so that you do get taken down different paths, and there are multiple suspects. So you're always trying to work out. I mean, I used to love those choose your own adventure books.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah.
I don't know if you remember them, but
I
yeah,
do. They were the Usborne ones or something.
I
I think
think
I
so.
used to work in a library. We used to have lots of them.
Yes, they were such a huge thing when I was a kid.
Yeah,
And I think that probably was quite good training for a writer's brain, because,
yeah,
it creates options, and you can sort of go down different paths, but ultimately you want to pull everyone down to the final path, which is where you reveal the sort of ta-da.
yeah, yeah. That's, yeah, exactly. That's it's. I mean, so would you like to just give us a sort of a so? One Dark Night is out on Thursday, which is the third, I believe. Is it
It
first
is,
July?
yep.
The
This
third
is
of
the
July.
hardback.
You've got the hardback. I've got the proof.
Yes.
And why should we pick it up and read it?
Well, first of all, if it stays this hot, I really think you need something to cool you down. And
Yeah,
this will take you into misty, rainy, very dark Somerset, Wiltshire territory. And you'll get to walk through the woods at night and get a few creepy scares along the way. And hopefully, if you want a book that feels like a puzzle that you
yeah.
have to solve, and some characters that I hope you might sort of really gel with and get invested in their stories, then I hope that if those sorts of things tick your boxes, then I reckon this could be a book for you to pick up.
I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, I think we say it's like a beach. I think it could be a beach read, even though it is set in October. I think because it is that sort of book that you could just sit on on the sunbed and just, because
Oh,
you want to keep reading, you want to
that's
keep going.
that's really lovely of you to say, Karen. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. Good luck on Thursday. Have you got anything planned for launch day?
Well, funny enough, I'm going to Bristol, and I'm going to spend the evening with a couple of friends who are talking about their books. So
Oh,
I'll be in a
nice.
bookshop with other writers, which will be lovely.
Oh,
So
that's good. Oh, good.
that's actually what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll have to just like slide a few of yours out on the table and
Yes. Yeah. Make a t-shirt.
yeah. I've seen that people have like earrings made, don't they, and like little
Uh,
necklaces. So
I've seen a lot of clever ways to promote your book. I need to
yeah.
get a bit more savvy at that.
Well, have a great day on Thursday. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
joining us, and thank you for entertaining me with One Dark Night. And yeah, we look forward to seeing what comes next.
Oh, thank you, Karen. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really lovely to chat to you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and join us again soon. I'm going to just turn this off, which I can't find my mouse. There we go.